customary 習慣的な customary gesture 身振り仕草 will 意図意思 originally 元は本来は practice 習慣 practical 実際的な現実的な purpose 目的 medieval 中世の stranger 見知らぬもの weapon 武器 defend 守る circle 回る extend 伸ばす広げる include 含む movement 動作 Today, in many parts of the world, it is customary for people to shake hands at meeting as a gesture of goodwill. Today, in many parts of the world, it is customary for people to shake hands at meetings as a gesture of goodwill. Originally, however, the practice of shaking hands had a more practical purpose. Shaking hands originated in medieval times. In those days, 当時 In those days, when a man came across a stranger, he would often reach for his weapon. Out of fear, 恐怖で in spite of himself, 思わず with his right hand. In case he had to use the weapon to defend himself. Sometimes the two men had been circling around each other with weapons in their hands. 二重状況 until they laid aside the weapons. Laid aside は置く They laid aside the weapons. Then the two persons extended their right hands to show they had no weapons. Extended hands は、手を差し出してるんですね。It is not known when and why the handshake changed from simple clasping of hands. これを読み方わからないですけど It is not known、これは when and why the handshake changed from simple clasping of hands to include shaking movements. This shaking movement of the clasped hands probably started as early as the 16th century. Today, in many parts of the world, it is customary for people to shake hands at meeting as a gesture of goodwill. Originally, however, the practice of shaking hands had a more practical purpose. Shaking hands originated in medieval times. In those days, when a man came across a stranger, he would often reach for his weapon out of fear in spite of himself. With his right hand, in case he had to use the weapon to defend himself. Sometimes The two men had been circling around each other with weapons in their hands until they laid aside the weapons. Then the two persons extended their right hands to show they had no weapons. It is not known when and why the handshake changed from a simple clasping of hands to include a shaking movement. The shaking movement of the clasped hands probably started as early as the 16th century.